Peace, love, and life, family. It's your girl, Morgan Renee Myers, just tuning in with you all for another chapter from Richard Wright's book, Black Boy. We are now in chapter 8. If I do recall, within the last chapter, in chapter 7, he was publishing one of his stories in a newspaper, and his grandma thought it was devil work, and I think was his uncle trying to whoop him in this one? No, but he's writing in the paper, and he's starting to get a vision of where he wants to take his life, which is going to lead him up north. So, here we go. Chapter 8 of Richard Wright's Black Boy. Summer again. The old problem of hunting for a job. I told the woman for whom I was working, a Mrs. Bibbs, that I needed an all-day job that would pay me enough money to buy clothes and books for the next school term. She took the matter up with her husband, who was a foreman in a sawmill. "So you want to work in the mill, huh?" he asked. "Yes, sir." He came to me and put his hands under my arms and lifted me from the floor as though I were a bundle of feathers. "You're too light for our work," he said, "but maybe I could do something." Okay. We unfroze. "That's the problem," he said soberly. "The work's heavy and dangerous." He was silent, and I knew that he considered the matter closed. That was the way things were between whites and blacks in the South. Many of the most important things were never openly said. They were understated, and left to seep through to one. I, in turn, said nothing, but I did not leave the room. My standing silent was a way of asking him to reconsider, telling him that I wanted ever so much to try for a job in his mill. "All right," he said finally. "Come to the mill in the morning. I'll see what I can do, but I don't think you'll like it." I was at the mill at dawn the next morning and saw men lifting huge logs with table blocks. There were scores of buzzing steel saws biting into green wood with loud whines. "Watch out," somebody yelled. Excuse me. I looked around and saw a black man pointing above my head. I glanced up. A log was swinging toward me. I scrambled out of its path. The black man came to my side. "What do you want here, boy?" "Mr. Bibbs, the foreman, told me to look around. I'm looking for a job," I said. The man gazed at me intently. "I wouldn't try for this if I was you," he said. "If you know this game, all right. But this is dangerous stuff for guys that's green." He held up his right hand, from which 3 fingers were missing. "See?" I nodded and left. Empty days, long days, bright, hot days. The sun heated the pavements until they felt like the top of an oven. I spent the morning hunting for jobs, and I read during the afternoons. One morning I was walking toward the center of town and passed the home of a classmate, Ned Greenley. He was sitting on his porch looking gloom. "Hello, Ned. What's new?" I asked. "You've heard, haven't you?" he asked. "About what?" "My brother, Bob." "No, what happened?" Ned began to weep softly. "They killed him," he managed to say. "The white folks?" I asked in a whisper, guessing. He sobbed his answer. Bob was dead. I had met him only a few times, but I felt that I had known him through his brother. "What happened?" They took him in a car out on country road. They shot him," Ned whimpered. I had heard that Bob was working at one of the hotels in town. "Why?" "They said he was fooling with a white prostitute in the hotel," Ned said. Inside of me, my world crashed and my body felt heavy. I stood looking down the quiet, sun-filled street. Bob had been caught by the White Death, the threat of which hung over every male black in the South. I had heard whispered tales of black boys having sex relations with white prostitutes in hotels in town. Now those tales came home to me in the form of the death of a man I knew. I did not search for a job that day. I returned home and sat on my porch, too, and stared. What I had heard altered the look of the world, induced me in a temporary paralysis of will and impulse. The penalty of death awaited me if I made a false move, and I wondered if it was worthwhile to make any move at all. The things that influenced my conduct as a Negro did not have to happen to me directly. I needed but to hear of them to feel their full effects in the deepest layers of my consciousness. Indeed, the white brutality that I had not seen was a more effective control of my behavior than that which I knew. The actual experience would have let me see the realistic outlines of what was really happening. But as long as it remained something terrible and yet remote, something whose horror and blood might descend upon me at any moment, I was compelled to give my entire imagination over to it, an act which blocked the springs of thought and feeling in me, creating a sense of distance between me and the world in which I lived. A few days later, I sought out the editor of the local Negro newspaper and found that he could not hire me. I had doubts now about my being able to enter school that fall. The empty days of summer rolled on. Whenever I met my classmates, they would tell me about the jobs they had found, how some of them had left town to work in summer resorts in the north. Why did they not tell me of these jobs? I demanded of them. They said that they simply had not thought of it, and as I heard the words fall from their lips, my sense of isolation began doubly acute. But after all, what would make them think of me in connection with jobs when for years I had encountered them only casually through school? Only casually in the classroom. I had had no association with them. The religious home in which I lived, my mush and lard gravy poverty had cut me off from the normal processes of the lives of black boys my own age. One afternoon, I made a discovery in a home that stunned me. I was talking to my cousin Maggie, who was a few months younger than I, when Uncle Tom entered the room. He paused, stared at me with silent hostility, then called his daughter. I gave the matter no thought. A few moments later, I rose from my chair where I had been reading and was on my way down the hall when I heard Uncle Tom scolding his daughter. I caught a few phrases. "Do you want me to break your neck? Didn't I tell you to stay away from him? That boy's a dangerous fool, I tell you. Then why don't you keep away from him and make the other children keep away from him? Ask me no questions, but do as I tell you. Keep away from him or I'll skin you." And I could hear my cousin's whimpering replies. My throat grew tight with anger. I wanted to rush into the room and demand an explanation, but I held still. How long had this been going on? I thought back over the time since Uncle Tom and his family had moved into the house, and I was filled with dismay as I recalled that on scarcely any occasion had any of his children ever been alone with me. Be careful now, I told myself. Don't see what isn't there. But no matter how carefully I weighed my memories, I could recall no innocent intimacy, no games, no playing, none of the association that usually exists between young people living in the same house. Then suddenly, I was reliving that early morning when I had held Uncle Tom at bay with my razors. Though I must have seemed brutal and desperate to him, I had never thought of myself as being so, and now I was appalled at how I was regarded. It was a flash of insight which revealed to me the true nature of my relations with my family, an insight which altered the entire course of my life. I was now definitely decided upon leaving home, but I would remain until the 9th grade term had ended. There were many days when I spoke to no one in the home except my mother. My life was falling into pieces, and I was acutely aware of it. I was poised for flight, but I was waiting for some event, some word, some act, some circumstance to furnish the impetus. I returned to my job at Mrs. Bibbs and bought my school books. My clothing remained little better than rags. Luckily, the studies in the 9th, my last year at school, were light, and during a part of the term, the teacher turned over the class to my supervision, an honor that helped me emotionally and made me hope faintly. It was even hinted that if I kept my grades high, it would be possible for me to teach in the city school system. During that winter, my brother came home from Chicago. I was glad to see him, though we were strangers, but it was not long before I felt that the affection shown him by the family was far greater than that which I had ever had from them. Slowly, my brother grew openly critical of me, taking his cue from those about him, and it hurt. My loneliness became organic. I felt walled in and I grew irritable. I associated less and less with my classmates, for their talk was now full of the schools they planned to attend when the term was over. The cold days dragged mechanically, up early, and to my job, splitting wood, carrying coal, sweeping floors, then off to school and boredom. The school term ended. I was selected valedictorian of my class and assigned to write a paper to be delivered at one of the public auditoriums. One morning, the principal summoned me to his office. "Well, Richard Wright, here's your speech," he said with smooth bluntness, and shoved a stack of staple sheets across the desk. "What speech?" I asked as I picked up the papers. The speech you're to say at graduation, he said. But, Professor, I've written my speech already, I said. He laughed confidently, indulgently. Listen, boy, you're going to speak to both white and colored people that night. What can you alone think of saying to them? You have no experience. I burned. I know I'm not educated, Professor, I said, but the people are coming to hear the students, and I won't make a speech that you've written. He leaned back in his chair and looked at me in surprise. You know, we've never had a boy in this school like you before, he said. You've had your way around here. Just how you managed to do it, I don't know. But listen, take this speech and say it. I know what's best for you. You can't afford to just say anything before those white people that night. He paused and added meaningfully, the superintendent of schools will be there. You're in a position to make a good impression on him. I've been a principal for more years than you are, old boy. Excuse me. I've seen many a boy and girl graduate from this school, and none of them was too proud to recite a speech I wrote for them. I had to make my mind up quickly. I was faced with a matter of principle. I wanted to graduate, but I did not want to make a public speech that was not my own. Professor, I'm going to say my own speech that night, I said. He grew angry. You're just a young, hot-headed fool, he said. He toyed with a pencil and looked up at me. Suppose you don't graduate. But I passed the examinations, I said. Look, mister, he shot at me. I'm the man who says you passes at this school. I was so astonished that my body jerked. I had gone to the school for 2 years, and I had never suspected what kind of man the principal was. It simply had never occurred to me to wonder about him. Then I don't graduate, I said flatly. I turned to leave. Say, you, come here, he called. I turned and faced him. He was smiling at me in a remote, superior sort of way. You know, I'm glad I talked to you, he said. I was seriously thinking of placing you in the school system teaching, but now I don't think that you'll fit. He was tempting me, baiting me. This was the technique that snared black young minds into supporting the Southern way of life. Look, Professor, I may never get a chance to go to school again, I said, but I like to do things right. What do you mean? I have no money. I'm going to work. Now, this 9th grade diploma isn't going to help me much in life. I'm not bitter about it. It's not your fault. But I'm just not going to do things this way. Have you talked to anybody about this? He asked me. No. Why? Are you sure? This is the first I've heard of it, Professor, I said, amazed again. You haven't talked to any white people about this? No, sir. I just wanted to know, he said. My amazement increased. The man was afraid now for his job. Professor, you don't understand me, I smiled. You're just a young, hot fool, he said, confident again. Wake up, boy. Learn the world you're living in. You're smart, and I know what you're after. I've kept closer track of you than you think. I know your relatives. Now, if you play safe, he smiled and winked, I'll help you go to school to college. I want to learn, Professor, I told him, but there are some things I don't want to know. Goodbye, he said. I went home, hurt but determined. I had been talking to a bought man, and he had tried to buy me. I felt that I had been dealing with something unclean. That night, Griggs, the boy who had gone through many classes with me, came to my house. Look, Dick, you're throwing away your future here in Jackson, he said. Go to the principal, talk to him, take his speech and say it. I'm saying the one he wrote you. So why can't you? What the hell? What can you lose? No, I said. Why? I know only a hell of a little, but my speech is going to reflect that, I said. Then you're going to be blacklisted for teaching jobs, he said. Who the hell said I was going to teach? I asked. God, but you've got a will, he said. It's not will. I just don't want to do things that way, I said. He left. 2 days later, Uncle Tom came to me. I knew that the principal had called him in. I hear that the principal wants you to say a speech which you rejected, he said. Yes, sir. That's right, I said. May I read the speech you written, he asked. Certainly, I said, giving him my manuscript. And may I see the one the principal wrote? I gave him the principal's speech, too. He went to his room and read them. I sat quiet, waiting. He returned. The principal's speech is the better speech, he said. I don't doubt it, I replied. But why did they ask me to write a speech if I can't deliver it? Would you let me work on your speech, he asked. No, sir. Now, look, Richard, this is your future. Uncle Tom, I don't care to discuss this with you, I said. He stared at me, then left. The principal's speech was simpler and clearer than mine, but it did not say anything. Mine was cloudy, but it said what I wanted to say. What could I do? I had half a mind not to show up at the graduation exercises. I was hating my environment more each day. As soon as school was over, I would get a job, save money, and leave. Griggs, who had accepted a speech written by the principal, came to my house each day, and we went off into the woods to practice orating. Day in and day out, we spoke to the trees, to the creeks, frightening the birds, making the cows in the pasture stare at us in fear. I memorized my speech so thoroughly that I could have recited in my sleep. The news of my clash with the principal had spread through the class, and the students became openly critical of me. "Richard, you're a fool. You're throwing away every chance you've got. If they had known the kind of fool boy you are, they would have never made you valedictorian," they said. I gritted my teeth and kept my mouth shut, but my rage was mounting by the hour. My classmates, motivated by a desire to save me, pestered me until I all but reached the breaking point. In the end, the principal had to caution them to let me alone for fear I would throw up the sponge and walk out. I had one more problem to settle before I could make my speech. I was the only boy in my class wearing short pants, and I was grimly determined to leave school in long pants. Was I not going to work? Would I not be on my own? My desire for long pants became known at home. Yet another storm shook the house. "You're trying to go too fast," my mother said. "You're nothing but a child," Uncle Tom pronounced. "He's beside himself," Granny said. I served notice that I was making my own decisions from then on. I borrowed money from Mrs. Bibbs, my employer, made a down payment on a pearl gray suit. If I could not pay for it, I would take the damn thing back after graduation. On the night of graduation, I was nervous and tense. I rose and faced the audience, and my speech rolled out. When my voice stopped, there was some applause. I did not care if they liked it or not. I was through. Immediately, even before I left the platform, I tried to shunt all memory of the event from me. A few of my classmates managed to shake my hand as I pushed toward the door, seeking the street. Somebody invited me to a party, and I did not accept. I did not want to see any of them again. I walked home saying to myself, to hell with it. With almost 17 years of baffled living behind me, I faced the world in 1925. So he about to be a man, y'all. He about to go out on his own, 17 years old, doing ninth grade. All right, that's the end of chapter 8. I'll get into chapter 9 sometime soon. Peace, love, and light. Thanks for tuning in.